We have multiple Toronto Blue Jays updates to go over today as Ben Nicholson-Smith and Schneider have dropped some major insight in their recent reports surrounding the Toronto Blue Jays offseason plans as well as their current outlook on Corbin Burnes. We're going to break that down in this episode as well as discuss Bob Nightingale. He just dropped a report revealing who the favorites truly are for Burnes as he nears a decision. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, folks, if you're a part of the percentage that aren't subscribed to the channel, about 73% of you who are watching right now are not subscribed. Make sure to smash that subscribe button if you're enjoying the daily Jays content. We've been uploading multiple times a day. We've been streaming. So if you want to support us, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're getting close to our goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're hoping to hit it before Christmas. That goal is still possible. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. And this has been a crazy offseason. We're hearing rumors. We're hearing some crazy rumors circulate surrounding Corbin Burnes. We've been hearing a bunch of reports coming out and thinking about how many players the Toronto Blue Jays have been linked to this season and this offseason, that is. It's crazy. And they still haven't really gotten a big fish. They, of course, traded for Andres Jimenez. They signed Jimmy Garcia. But other than that, things have been a little bit quiet. And let's dive into the reports now. There's a lot to go over today, so buckle up because there's a lot of things to go into. But I want to start with, and this, of course, the article from Ben Nicholson-Smith and Shada Vidi. But I want to start with, we have some stuff from Keegan Matheson as well. This here. So Bob Nightingale earlier today dropped a report saying the San Francisco Giants are the heavy favorites for Corbin Burnes while the Mets are trying to bring back Pete Alonso. And Corbin Burnes at the moment is obviously the big fish. It's between the Giants and it's between the Blue Jays. And it seems at this point, the Toronto Blue Jays probably have the highest offer, but we know that, Ken Rosenthal came out and basically said that, hey, Corbin Burnes wants to go. He's from California, right? So he wants to go back home to San Francisco, but they're not really stepping up and offering the amount of money. Whereas the Blue Jays, at this point, it seems like they have the biggest offer on the table, but Corbin Burnes is holding out. Scott Boras is holding out. So that's still a coin flip at this point. I still think there's a good chance he becomes a Toronto Blue Jay. And this tweet here from Billy Steffen was making its rounds yesterday saying Corbin Burnes at Toronto, 7 years, 252. Complete rumor at this point. He's gotten some things right in the past regarding the the NHL. And things like that, but this really blew up last night and people thought, hey, is this actually real? And then this came out, of course, later today. So it's take this with a grain of salt. I don't think it's legit at this point, but I want to throw this in here. It was blowing up all over Twitter, but again, take it with a grain of salt. It's very interesting for sure. But at this point, it seems that the Giants are heavy favorites for Corbin Burnes, which is a little bit discouraging. That being said, I still think there is a good chance that Corbin Burnes ends up a Toronto Blue Jay if the Jays just step up their offer and really blow San Francisco out of the water here. And this dropped yesterday from Susan Slusser, one of the more notable San Francisco Giants reporters, and they said the Giants spoke to Burnes and Boras before the meetings, and there seemed to be momentum towards a possible deal. But as other starters came off the board and Burnes' already high projected price tag looked to go higher, chatter about San Francisco has dipped and the Jays have moved in the perceived frontrunner spot. Now, this was yesterday, and this is from a San Francisco Giants reporter. And then this came out today from Bob Nightingale, who, again, it isn't John Heyman, and this is a Scott Boras client. So I'm taking this with a grain of salt. I'm taking all this with a grain of salt, of course. But it's interesting because sometimes some people say the Jays are frontrunners. Some people say the Jays are, not favorites. So I think a decision is imminent, maybe tonight or tomorrow at the latest, like Ken Rosenthal said in his other, article there. So it's interesting. And you had Keegan Matheson come out and said, yes, they're in on Corbin Burnes, and he's always felt likelier than Max Fried. So there's a bunch of different reports that are going on. Ultimately, I think the Jays are going to make a very strong and compelling offer for Corbin Burnes, and whether or not he takes it is still up in the air. And if they don't get Corbin Burnes, we've seen a few different things happen here. We've seen the Red Sox go out and get Garrett Crochet. You see the Yankees went out and they got Max Fried. They paid him a very expensive deal. If you're the Blue Jays and you see these AL East opponents, AL East rivals even, getting these great starting pitchers, you have to go out and do the same thing. You have to go out and get at least some sort of the starting pitching depth even. Obviously, Corbin Burnes would be the ace, the frontline starter, but you can't go into next season with, the current roster you have regarding pitching. Yes, it's good, but it's not reliable enough, basically. You need to get maybe even a Sean Manaea if you strike out on Corbin Burnes. But let's dive into some of the reports here from Ben Nicholson and Shada Vidi. Put simply, the Jays are well aware they need more help. They continue talking to prominent free agents, with others appearing more realistic than some. So Teoscar, Jock Peterson have their supporters within the organization, while Corbin Burnes doesn't seem especially likely. But at this point in the offseason, there are trade-offs, and that's where things get really interesting for the Blue Jays. So it's interesting to me because the whole time, Ben Nicholson-Smith, Shada Vidi, they've been talking about how it's unlikely the Jays get Burnes. It's unlikely all these things. So they've been very pessimistic. The reporting has been, and maybe you're saying realistic instead of pessimistic. I'm going to go with pessimistic, but it's interesting. And you can also see here, outfield now looks like the most logical place to upgrade. The DH spot is relatively open. They could be interested in a guy like Jock Peterson and Josh Naylor. We'll have tons of videos on that going forward. But at the end of the day, You can see this here. The team needs work, and they will likely begin as the season as a flawed team, but there's hope internally that a pathway exists for meaningful upgrades. While optimism alone doesn't change anything, it's worth remembering that baseball tends to be unpredictable. Anyone who thinks they have the sport figured out is likely in for a reality check sooner than later. Baseball is awful, said one executive at the Hilton Anatole, whatever it is. And while they appear to be joking, it was impossible to tell for sure. And it is interesting because, the Jays are in on Corbin Burnes. They were in on Juan Soto. They're in on all these guys. They're in on Max Fried to a degree. And then now you're looking like you're going to strike out on potentially all of those guys. And if this comes to fruition, if Billy Steffen is right, then sure, I'd be very happy because I think at this point, a Corbin Burnes signing would be electric for the team. I think it is something that they kind of need. They need a big splash to keep up with the Boston Red Sox, to keep up with all these other teams. But now you're looking at it and you're like, hey, they really need to go. They need to go and they need to make a move. Now, if it isn't Corbin Burnes, if it's some other guy like Sean Manaea and Teoscar Hernandez, that would still work. I still think there's an avenue here and there's a path for the Jays to remain competitive and have a very good offseason without Corbin Burnes. But as you look at the Red Sox sell a lot of their top prospects, albeit none of their key top 5 ones, or they're really good prospects. I think they gave up one of their top 5 prospects. Let me know down below in the comment section. But they gave up some of their top prospects. They took a swing for Garrett Crochet, one of the best pitchers in baseball, especially with some of the highest upside of any starting pitcher in baseball. You see the Yankees, they go, like I mentioned earlier, you go out and you get Max Fried, who is a very good starting pitcher. Some would prefer him over Corbin Burnes. You start to think about, hey, what is going on with this team? And as you continue to actually, work on what would make sense for the Toronto Blue Jays, they also have the DH spot they'd have to go and come out with. If there's one spot the Jays can wait the market on, expected to be DH. I don't see them using DH to rotate players, and I don't think that's a good idea here. Finally, more people are openly saying that this club needs more power and to raise its offensive ceiling. And that's the biggest thing for me. Now, whether you go out and you get a Teoscar, you get a Anthony Santander, I still think Santander is a likely Blue Jay at this point. That's still what I think is going to happen. I think they are, of course, waiting on Corbin Burnes. Of course, waiting on Corbin Burnes to see what his decision is. If he ends up going to the Giants, they'll have to pivot quickly, and I'd like to think they have a plan in place. Now, whether that is, like I mentioned, Sean Manaea, there's Jack Flaherty still available. There are still some pitchers and hitters available for that matter that the Jays can target, but as you look at a lot of these updates, some of them are encouraging, some of them are a little bit less encouraging. Front runner. This was from yesterday. Today it's coming out saying the Giants are front runners. Like, the situation is so ridiculous that you're not even sure who to believe at this point. But regarding Ben Nicholson-Smith and Shai Davidi, it seems like they're definitely targeting a DH type. I think they make a splash there, but optimism that was once there is a little bit dwindled at this point because they struck out on Juan Soto. They struck out on Max Fried, and they might strike out on Corbin Burnes here. We'll keep you up to date with that because I do ultimately think a decision is nearing, and I hope Billy Steffen is right. That being said, I'm definitely taking all these reporters with a grain of salt, but let me know down below what your thoughts are. We'll have, of course, other videos highlighting the most recent reports. There are a ton of things coming out as of right now. Corbin Burnes is the main focus for now, so we're going to keep you up to date on that. Of course, after that, the Jays have a bunch of different avenues they can go with Jock Peterson, Teoscar Hernandez, Anthony Santander, Sean Manaea, like I mentioned earlier. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. Again, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. See you later.